Thank you, Your Excellency. Ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, may I kindly invite you all to rise for the African Union anthem, please. Thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates, very good morning to all of you. Your Excellency Musa Faki Mohammed, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Your Excellency Mr. Dr. Gideon Timotheus, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, Your Excellency Dr. Muhammad Salim Wild Marzouk, Minister of Foreign Affairs, African Cooperation and Mauritanians Abroad, Chairperson of the African Union Executive Council, Your Excellency Dr. Claver Gatet, Under-Secretary General and Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, Your Excellency Dr. Monique Nzanza Baganwa, the Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Excellencies, Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, Commissioners, and all leadership of the Commission, Excellencies, Directors of Organs and Recs, Excellencies, Ambassadors, members of the Permanent Representative Committee, members of the press, distinguished delegates, all protocol observed. A very good morning to all of you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's a profound honor and privilege for me today to welcome you to the opening ceremony of the 46th Ordinary Session of the African Union Executive Council, here in this Nelson Mandela Hall at the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa. We gather today in the very vibrant and evolving city of Addis Ababa, which is also known for its landscapes, warm hospitality, and thriving cultural scenes. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates, this meeting is held in a strategic moment for our continent, as it will oversee the elections of the AU commissioners today, who will continue to drive Africa's integration, governance, and development agenda, while addressing emerging global and regional challenges. Having said so, the program of today's opening ceremony will stand as follows. We will have a statement by his Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, host country of the African Union, following which we will have a statement by His Excellency Musa Faki Mohammed, Chairperson of the African Union Commission. Then His Excellency Dr. Claver Gatet, Under-Secretary General and Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. This will be followed by the statement by His Excellency Dr. Mohammed Salim Wild Marzouk, Minister of Foreign Affairs, African Cooperation and Mauritanians Abroad, Chairperson of the African Union Executive Council. Excellencies, without any further ado, I now have the honor to invite His Excellency Dr. Gideon Timotheus, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, to deliver his opening remarks. Your Excellency. Your Excellency, thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Your Excellency, Dr. Mohammed Salim Ould Marzouk, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Cooperation and Mauritanians Abroad, and Chairperson of the Executive Council. Your Excellency, Musa Faki Mohammed, Chairperson of the African Union Commission. Your Excellency, Dr. Claver Gatete, Executive Secretary of UNECA and Under-Secretary General of the United Nations, distinguished ministers, ladies and gentlemen. I have the honor and great pleasure to warmly welcome all of you to Addis Ababa for the 46th Ordinary Session of the Executive Council of the African Union. Excellencies, as we gather here today, we are confronting the reality of turbulent changes that are severely challenging multilateralism. For Africa and the rest of the Global South, multilateralism is both a choice and a necessity. It is a choice because we believe in collaboration, consensus building, and partnership. It is a necessity because most of the challenges we face are global and their solutions are found in multilateral frameworks. From climate change, environmental pollution and degradation to the desertification, biodiversity, pandemics, and other global health issues, all require multilateral solutions. We must thus redouble our efforts to strengthen the United Nations, the African Union, and other African regional bodies. They are indispensable for the health and well-being of current and future generations. Your Excellencies, it is also alarming to witness the increasing number of internal and interstate conflicts globally. Africa has, unfortunately, more than its fair share. It is not just conflicts, but we are also seeing polarization and geopolitical rivalry that are posing a challenge to the world order as we know it. Advances in technology, such as artificial intelligence, are also giving rise to threats and opportunities that would have been considered science fiction just a few years ago. In these times, African unity, cooperation, and solidarity are of the utmost importance. The coming wave of change could either lift us all to a better position or throw us into the unknown. How we manage the risks and how we utilize the opportunities of the new era will determine our destiny as a continent. As a continent, we advocate for a reformed global governance, including the reform of the United Nations Security Council. We also call for an international financial system that supports Africa's growth and enables the continent to tackle its challenge effectively. We demand access to climate financing and technology. These efforts and the need to overcome man-made and natural disasters requires us to stand united and use our continental organization as an effective instrument to advance our collective aspirations. Mr. Chairperson, the vision outlined in Africa's Agenda 2063 holds great promise for our continent's prosperity. Realizing this immense potential requires more than just strategic frameworks. It requires strong political will, effective coordination, and robust partnerships among member states and regional economic communities. Only through collective efforts can we ensure the successful implementation of Agenda 2063 and transform Africa into the Africa we want. This requires us to strengthen our efforts to realize Africa's flagship projects, to unlock our growth and prosperity potential, and consolidate on the progress we made in creating a continent-wide free trade area. Ethiopia is committed to starting trading under the African Continental Free Trade Area as part of our endeavor to ensure the transformative impact of inter-Africa trade on continental integration. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as Africa continues to push for greater participation in global decision-making, Ethiopia is convinced that the African Union's membership in the G20 would provide our continent with a vital platform to shape global economic governance. This would enable us to play a key role in policies that directly affect Africa's socio-economic development, ensuring that our continent's priorities are addressed in global decision-making processes. I would also like to take this opportunity to congratulate the Republic of South Africa for its chairmanship of the G20. We are confident that under its able leadership, Africa's agenda will come to the fore in this platform. The peace and security situation in our continent will also require us all to strengthen our continental-wide institutional capacity to foster mediation and conflict prevention mechanisms. Ethiopia also takes this opportunity to commend the African Union's peacekeeping missions and the critical role they play in maintaining peace and security across the continent. As we deliberate on this and other critical issues, let us renew our commitment to the traditional African solidarity and friendship. Africa's future depends on our collective will and action. Together, we can overcome the challenge before us and unlock the potential of our continent for the benefit of all African peoples. I look forward to productive discussions and meaningful outcomes in the course of this session. Once again, Excellencies, I would like to welcome you all to your city, Addis Ababa, and I wish you a productive and enjoyable stay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. We highly appreciate the warm welcome and generous hospitality extended to our Excellencies, the Ministers, and distinguished delegates. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, while inviting His Excellency Musa Faki Mohammed, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, to deliver his statement, I would like to take this opportunity to extend our sincere congratulations and gratitude for the leadership, dedication, and remarkable achievements in advancing Africa's unity, peace, and security in the continent to achieve the Africa we want. Excellencies, Excellency, Dr. Musa Faki Mohammed, the floor is yours.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على نبيه الصادق الأمين. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, il y a 4 jours, une grande figure de l'histoire africaine a disparu. Un grand combattant de la liberté et de la libération a tiré sa révérence. Le président Sam Nujoma de Namibie. Je vous prie de vous lever et d'observer une minute de silence en sa mémoire. Paix à son âme, je vous remercie. Excellence, Monsieur Mohamed Salim Ould Marzouk, ministre des Affaires étrangères de la République islamique de Mauritanie et président du Conseil exécutif de l'Union africaine. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les membres du Conseil exécutif, Monsieur le secrétaire exécutif de la Commission des Nations Unies pour l'Afrique, Excellences, Madame la vice-présidente de la Commission de l'Union africaine, Mesdames et Messieurs les commissaires, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les membres du COREP, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs exécutifs des communautés économiques régionales et mécanismes régionaux, Mesdames et Messieurs les représentants et envoyés spéciaux et chefs du bureau de l'Union africaine, Mesdames et Messieurs les observateurs, Mesdames et Messieurs en vos grades et qualités, distingués invités, chers amis. Permettez-moi tout d'abord de vous souhaiter pour la dernière fois, comme président de la Commission, mes meilleurs souhaits de bienvenue au siège de votre organisation, à Nelson Mandela Hall, témoin éternel de nos rencontres et de notre diplomatie continentale. À toi, mon frère Mohamed Salim Marzouk, je voudrais en particulier te dire combien j'ai été ravi d'avoir fini mon mandat avec toi. Ton engagement, ton ouverture d'esprit et ta constante disponibilité, j'en garderai un merveilleux souvenir. Je voudrais aussi présenter mes vifs remerciements au comité des représentants permanents, aux réunions duquel je n'ai pas toujours été en mesure de prendre part, ce que je regrette, bien sûr. Surtout la dernière, pendant laquelle je comptais lui faire mes adieux. Mieux vaut tard que jamais. Mesdames et Messieurs les ambassadeurs, infiniment merci. Je félicite le COREP pour l'excellent travail reflété dans son rapport qui sera présenté sous peu. Je voudrais à cet égard exprimer mes chaleureuses félicitations à toi, Madame la Présidente du COREP, ma chère sœur Khadijatou, pour ton efficacité, ton dynamisme et ton leadership. Avec le comité des représentants permanents, la Commission, voyez-vous, a une belle histoire. Et comme toutes les belles histoires, la passion, la vivacité et les enrichissements mutuels sont la règle. Aux communautés économiques régionales, qui sont en vertu du nouveau code, du nouveau protocole révisé, désormais parmi nous, comme nous devrions être parmi eux. Même si malheureusement, ça n'a pas toujours été ainsi. Mais soit. Qu'à cela ne tienne, je voudrais toutefois leur exprimer une pensée solidaire et fraternelle. Au personnel technique, de sécurité et protocole, qui se dévouent jours et nuits pour nous créer les meilleures conditions de travail, et au-delà d'eux, à tous nos organes, j'exprime mes vifs remerciements et toute ma reconnaissance pour leur soutien et efficace accompagnement tout au long des années qui nous ont réunis dans cette belle aventure. En vérité, m'adressant à vous, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, membres du Conseil exécutif, j'ai eu durant ces 8 dernières années de mon double mandat le sentiment de toujours appartenir à cet organe central de notre organisation, le Conseil exécutif, ce club des ministres des Affaires étrangères, que j'ai eu l'honneur de présider juste avant mon accession à mon actuelle finissante mission. J'y ai siégé pendant 17 ans, d'affilée, 9 ans en tant que ministre des Affaires étrangères de mon pays et 8 ans comme président de la Commission de l'Union africaine. D'ailleurs, je vois encore quelques collègues dont les cheveux, comme les miens, ont pris une certaine couleur argentée. Mahmoud Youssouf, Bella le jeune, Robert Dussé, je ne sais pas quel est son secret, sa tête est toujours noire, Jean-Claude Ngakosso, Nasser Boureta, Mahamadou Tangara. Je vois aussi quelque part Pierre Moukoko, chef de l'unité de réforme, qui fut du nôtre pendant cette aventure. Comment vous cacher mon regret de voir que 6 de nos collègues n'arrivent toujours pas à prendre leur place parmi nous pour raison de changements non constitutionnels dans leur pays. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, chers amis, ensemble, avec le constant soutien de nos chefs d'État, nous avons fait beaucoup et avons jeté les bases de davantage d'ambitieux programmes. Il n'y a presque aucun domaine significatif où nous n'avons pas sémé, cultivé et parfois cueilli, même si les intempéries politiques, économiques et diplomatiques ont quelquefois réduit notre productivité et notre production, pour rester dans une métaphore agricole. Dans le domaine de la santé, la COVID-19 a été vaincue comme l'a été Ebola et les Mpox. Africa CDC s'affirme comme un outil efficace. L'Agence africaine des médicaments AMA s'installe. L'Agence humanitaire africaine sort de ses limbes. Le PANVAC s'équipe, se consolide. L'éducation se modernise et met définitivement le cap sur le futur, en centrant l'attention et les efforts sur l'innovation et l'intelligence artificielle. La stratégie industrielle s'ébauche. La zone de libre-échange continentale ZLECAf s'opérationnalise en dépit des obstacles. Les positions africaines sur le climat se consolident. L'agriculture et l'économie bleue prennent peu à peu leur place naturelle dans nos choix stratégiques. Le secteur des infrastructures et de l'énergie a connu des avancées significatives. Presque tous les organes de l'Union et toutes les agences spécialisées dont je vous fais grâce de la liste se sont maintenus dans des progrès constants, tant au niveau de leur consolidation institutionnelle que dans la diversité des programmes et projets réalisés. La réforme institutionnelle de notre organisation a connu des progrès significatifs et se poursuit pour des conclusions heureuses. Nos partenariats internationaux s'élargissent et s'ouvrent de nouveaux horizons. Notre crédibilité internationale et notre visibilité dans l'arène mondiale se sont affirmées de façon significative. Des rapports circonstanciés sur tous ces palmarès seront présentés certainement au sommet. Il est superflu, donc, de vous en encombrer maintenant. Excellences, Monsieur le Président, Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, de tels acquis ne devraient pas occulter nos insuffisances, nos lacunes, nos difficultés et les défis qui continuent de toutes parts de nous assaillir. Des violents conflits continuent de tuer à une large échelle en Afrique. Le Soudan et l'Est de la République démocratique du Congo en sont les théâtres les plus poignants, les plus...
Hello viewers, this is Berka Sisa live from Addis for the Pulse of Africa. The Pulse of Africa is the new continental media organization which is dubbed as the Face of Ethiopia and the Voice of Africa. It covers the social, political and economic dynamics of Africa as well as the international engagement of Africa for the betterment of its continent and its people. Today we are here at the headquarters of the African Union where the 38th African Union heads of state and government is going to take place. This big continental event is going to be attended by African leaders, foreign ministers, ambassadors, and international representatives of institutions. So, as part of the 38th organization of the African Union, today the 46th organization of the Executive Council will be held, and the session is going to be start after a while. As you know, today session is going to be chaired by the African foreign ministers, and it's held every 2 years. Every year's 2 days before the main assembly, and they primarily focus on the reports of the Permanent Representative Committee of the African countries to the African Union. At the same time, they focus on the draft agenda and the decision of the African Union Assembly of the leaders. So, what are some of the expected main points of the discussion of the session?
Yeah, you're right, Berkut. And before I go to that, I want to double down on what it means, the pulse of Africa for the African continent. And it's been long years since Africa has been portrayed by many media across the globe in a negative way. And the pulse of Africa is trying to tell the African narratives by Africans ourselves. And this is one of the primary issues that we've been seeking and requiring for years and years. And we're now beginning with that from the headquarters of the African Union. And to be back to what you have already raised, the 46 AU Executive Council's meeting has already kicked with the opening remark of the Foreign Minister Gideon Timotheus and the African Union Commission Chairperson Musa Faki Mohammed. And we are here live, and some of the expected things that will be discussed during the Executive Council meetings are, one of them is the selection of the commissioners. The commissioners had been, the African Union had 8 commissioners, which was reduced recently to 6, and they are expected to select 6. And the selection of the commissioners is based on some of the principles that has been approved by the heads of states during the summit of 2021. And some of them are equitable regional representation, gender parity, and predictable rotation, and based on merit and even transparency. And these are some of the things that are expected during the executive committee.
Yeah, that's so. As you said, the other major point of the discussion will be the economic integration of Africa. As we know that there are a lot of attempts and activity made by the African countries in terms of bringing about the economic integration of African countries, but Africa still has a long way to go in terms of economic integration. For example, if you look at the infrastructure connectivity between and among African countries, it's very minimal. Like to speak of, for example, the air transport, the railway transport, as well as the road transport connectivity between and among African countries is very, very much minimal given the capacity of the African countries. To speak of the intra-African trade, the intra-African trade by now is below 50%. That's why the African Union Commission launched the Africa Continental Free Trade Area by 2021, and still in this initiative in a pilot stage. Now it's become almost 4 years, but the implementation pace is very slow. So this session we try to focus on these issues and other related with the economic integration of the African countries.
And some of the other issues that will be raised again during this 46th Executive Council meeting is about peace and security. And we will be back with the updates and other related things within the Executive Council meeting. And stay tuned.
Thank you.
Communities, international organizations and development partners, distinguished delegates, colleagues, good morning. It is an honor to address this esteemed gathering at the 46th Ordinary Session of the Executive Council of the African Union under the significant theme, Justice for Africans and the People of African Descent through Reparations. I wish to extend my gratitude to the African Union Commission for prioritizing this theme of the year, and I would like to use this opportunity to congratulate the African Union Chairperson, His Excellency Musa Faki Mohammed, for his exemplary leadership throughout his tenure. We thank you very much. I also salute the heads of state and government who have committed to launching the 2025 theme in their respective countries, demonstrating their collective resolve to secure justice for Africa and its diaspora. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, we cannot contest the fact that the transatlantic slave trade and colonial exploitation robbed Africa of its people, resources, and dignity, and left behind inequalities that persist in global financial systems, trade structures, and governance institutions till this day. The extraction of Africa's resources without corresponding development, the undervaluation of the African economies in global credit assessments, and the systemic barriers to trade and investment are indeed contemporary manifestations of the historical injustices. It is therefore crucial that these beyond financial compensation must be addressed as part of our conversation on reparative justice. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, Africa's current global financial standing reveals the stark inequalities it faces. The continent possesses 30% of the world's mineral reserves, including 40% of the gold and up to 90% of its chromium and platinum. It also contains as much as 65% of the world's arable land, yet Africa accounts for less than 3% of global trade and only 1% of global manufacturing output. Furthermore, in 2023, for example, intra-African trade stood at just 16% compared to the intra-European trade at 68%. Moreover, it is unjust that the entire African continent has an IMF shareholding equal to one of a single country, Germany. These disparities are not just due to lack of economic potential, but to entrenched structural barriers that keep Africa in a cycle of economic dependency. Distinguished delegates, in addition to this, the injustice extends to Africa's credit ratings, which are dominated by external agencies that sometimes apply unfair and subjective assessments to African economies. As we speak, only 2 countries, Botswana and Mauritius, hold investment-grade ratings, while others, despite sound economic fundamentals, are burdened with high-risk labels. This situation inflames borrowing costs, stifles investment, and keeps African economies locked in debt cycles. Added to these economic disparities is the fact that although Africa contributed the least to climate change, it is suffering the most from its effects. Currently, climate change is costing Africa up to 5% of GDP. Yet, of the $10 trillion invested in globally in clean energy between 2015 and 2022, Africa received only 2%. However, this must change. Africa cannot build prosperity on a foundation designed to constrain its growth. To translate this call for justice into tangible outcomes, I propose 5 key areas of focus. First, the current global financial architecture is outdated, inequitable, and unjust, and must be reformed to be fit for purpose. We must advocate for debt restructuring that allows African nations to invest in their people and development instead of paying exorbitant interest rates. A just world requires governance reforms in international financial institutions to ensure that Africa has a strong voice in shaping global economic policies. Also, it is imperative to establish an African-led credit rating agency to ensure fair assessments reflect Africa's true economic realities rather than outdated risk perceptions. Second, the African Continental Free Trade Area is a game changer. With a market of 1.5 billion people and a combined GDP of over $3 trillion, it presents an unparalleled opportunity to boost industrialization and trade within the continent. It is therefore essential to fully harness the CFTA's potential to accelerate investments in infrastructure and manufacturing to reduce dependency on external markets. It is also paramount that we develop regional value chains to ensure that Africa produces and processes its own raw materials and creates jobs and industries that benefit Africans. Third, we must prioritize in-continent value addition on Africa's vast mineral wealth. For centuries, Africa's wealth has fueled the prosperity of others while its own people remain impoverished. This must end. Africa's resources must benefit Africans first, rather than being exported in raw form and re-imported at a very high cost. True reparative justice means that Africa's resources must work for Africa. Fourth, we must recognize that Africa's strength extends beyond its borders. In this regard, the African diaspora, which is connected to the continent through historical injustices, must be a key partner in our development. To this end, we must foster economic and cultural partnerships with the diaspora through investment platforms and heritage initiatives, such as the establishment of scholarships programs for descendants of enslaved Africans to reconnect with and contribute to Africa's development. Furthermore, we must reclaim our identity and history by demanding the restitution of stolen African artifacts and cultural heritage. Finally, the forced movement of our ancestors centuries ago must now be countered with the freedom of mobility. We must accelerate the African integration because a fragmented Africa can never reach its full potential. This requires that we implement the Africa Protocol on free movement of persons to facilitate trade, knowledge transfer, and cultural unity, and strengthen regional economic cooperation to enhance resilience and shared prosperity. Excellencies, the injustice of the past must no longer define Africa's future. We have the tools, the resources, and the will to reclaim Africa's agency, and the ECA remains steadfast in our commitment to work with you and bridge the gap between Africa and the diaspora, reclaim our economic sovereignty, and secure a future where all Africans can live with dignity and prosperity. I thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your commitment towards promoting economic and social development in Africa. It is now my distinct honor to invite His Excellency, Dr. Mohammed Salim Wild Marzouk, Minister of Foreign Affairs, African Cooperation and Mauritanians Abroad, Chairperson of the African Union Executive Council, to deliver his statement. Your Excellency.
بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. أصحاب المعالي أعضاء المجلس التنفيذي للإتحاد الإفريقي، صاحب المعالي وأخي الفاضل مسبقين محمد رئيس مفوضية الاتحاد الإفريقي، صاحب السعادة سيد كلافير جاتتي، أصحاب السعادة السفراء والمندوبين دائمين، وأعضاء البعثات الدبلوماسية وممثلي الدول الأعضاء، أصحاب السعادة المفوضون المديرون في مفوضية الاتحاد الإفريقي، أيها السادة والسيدات. اسمحوا لي في البداية أن أشكر باسمكم جميعا شعب وحكومة جمهورية إثيوبيا الفيدرالية الديمقراطية على ما أحاطونا به من حفاوة الاستقبال وكرم الضيافة منذ وصولنا لهذا البلد الجميل والجميل. كما أود أن أشيد بالأداء لصاحب المعالي أخي وصديقي
أعزائي المشاهدين، أسعد الله أوقاتكم بكل خير. من هنا من العاصمة أديس أبابا مقر الاتحاد الأفريقي ننقل لكم أحداث وفعاليات القمة الأفريقية ال38 للقادة الأفارقة، وكذلك الدورة ال46 للمجلس التنفيذي على مستوى الوزراء، من قناتكم الإخبارية والترفيهية قناة POA عربي، نبض أفريقيا POA عربي، وجه أثيوبيا POA عربي، نبض أفريقيا. كونوا معنا.
ننقل لكم فعاليات القمة الأفريقية من قلب العاصمة الإثيوبية ومن داخل مقر الاتحاد الأفريقي عبر قناتكم POA عربي، وجه إثيوبيا وصوت أفريقيا. ما هي التوقعات، ما هي أهم الاستعدادات التي قامت بها إثيوبيا لاستضافة القمة الأفريقية؟
نعم، نقدم لكم هذه الفعاليات وتغطية الأحداث، حيث اكتملت الاستعدادات التي قامت بها الحكومة الأثيوبية من خلال استقبال الوفود الذين جاءوا من كافة بقاع الدول الأفريقية على مستوى الوزراء للمشاركة في هذه الاجتماعات التي تناقش الكثير من القضايا والمواضيع المتعلقة والتي تهم المواطن الأفريقي بصورة عامة، حيث أعلنت وزارة الخارجية الأثيوبية عن تعيين أكثر من 100 شاب وشابة متحدثين باللغات الأجنبية لتسهيل إقامة هذه الوفود المشاركة، وكذلك الشرطة الفيدرالية الأثيوبية وإتيو تيليكوم الاتصالات الأثيوبية والفنادق وغيرها من الخدمات، وذلك لجعل الأوقات جميلة بالنسبة للوفود الذين يحضرون إلى العاصمة أديس أبابا. ولا ننسى أيضا حديث رئيس الوزراء أبي أحمد والذي شجع فيه المشاركون في هذه القمة للتعرف على تاريخ وثقافة أثيوبيا باعتبارها أرض الأصل. نعم أخي كيروبيل، ما هي أهم القضايا التي ستقوم هذه القمة بمناقشتها؟
انطلقت فعاليات الدورة العادية السادسة وال40 للمجلس التنفيذي للاتحاد الأفريقي صباح اليوم، يجتمع تحت شعار العدالة للأفارقة وللأشخاص من ذو أصول أفريقية.
نعم.
ومن خلال التعويضات ستقوم جميع الدول الأعضاء الاتحاد الأفريقي بمراجعة وتقييم الإنجازات التي حققتها القارة في خلال الأعوام السابقة. وأيضا سيتناول الاجتماع الذي يحضره العديد من وزراء الخارجية من الدول الأعضاء الأفريقية مواضيع مهمة للقارة مثل التنمية والسلام والأمن، وأيضا يوجد تعيين 6 مفوضين خلال اليومين القادمين.
نعم، إذن ما هي أهم المميزات التي تحظى به هذه القارة القمة في الاتحاد الأفريقي هذا العام؟
ما هي المميزات الذي يميز القمة الأفريقية لهذا العام؟
نعم، هنالك الكثير من الأشياء التي تميز القمة هذه العام، ابتداء من الشعار الذي تمنته هذه القمة، وهو الحصول على اعتراف دولي بالنسبة للظلم الذي حقق ضد الأفارقة ومن ذوي الأصول الأفريقية في زمن الاستعمار والعبودية، حيث تنادي أفريقيا الآن بالتعويض المناسب لهذه الظلم الذي لحق بهم، وكذلك الهيكلة التي ستكون لمفوضية الاتحاد الأفريقي وغيرها من المواضيع التي تميز هذا العام.
ومن المتوقع أيضا أن ينظر المجلس التنفيذي على التقارير المتعلقة بالحالة المالية للمنظمة من حيث أولويتها الرئيسية، بما في ذلك الحفاظ على السلام والأمن في القارة وأجندة 2063، أيضا الاقتصادية لأفريقيا ومعالجة التأثيرات المدمرة للمناخ في أفريقيا والحكم الرشيد في جميع أنحاء القارة. وبالإضافة إلى ذلك سيتلقى المجلس التنفيذي حول إحاطة التقدم المحرز في تنفيذ أجندة 2063.
نعم، جميع الأنظار الآن محولة في جميع أنحاء العالم وأفريقيا نحو العاصمة أديس أبابا وقمة الاتحاد الأفريقي، حيث سيصدر الكثير من القرارات والقرارات المتعلقة بتحسين حياة المواطن من خلال التكامل الاقتصادي، من خلال تنفيذ أجندة 2063 وغيرها من القضايا التي تمس المواطن الأفريقي. من هنا نقدم لكم POA عربي من أديس أبابا هذه الفعاليات على البث المباشر، فتابعونا أعزائي المشاهدين.
أعزائي المشاهدين، تابعونا على قناتكم الترفيهية POA عربي، على قناتكم الإخبارية والترفيهية POA عربي. سنواصل تغطية هذه الفعاليات في هذه الأيام.
كونوا معنا.
اجتماعا استثنائيا لمعالجة قضية أخرى طالما استعصت على الحل، وهي تدقيق المهارات وتقييم الكفاءات بمفوضية الاتحاد الإفريقي عملية سكر. وقد أسفر هذا الاجتماع عن تكليف لجنة مصغرة من مختلف الأقاليم بصياغة قرار نهائي يضمن القيام بالمطلوب وفق مبدأ الجدارة المطلقة الذي أقرته الدول الأعضاء بهدف تمكين المفوضية من استقطاب كفاءات مؤهلة لتعزيز أدائها. وسنوافيكم قريبا بالمقرر المذكور بعد وضع اللجنة للمسات الأخيرة عليه. أصحاب المعالي والسعادة أيها السادة والسيدات، كان نشاط مجلسنا التنفيذي السنة الماضية مكثفا، وقد شمل مشاركتنا في التحضير لقمة الأسمدة في نيروبي عبر اجتماع موسع شمل وزراء الزراعة، وانعقاد دورتنا العادية في أكرا، بالإضافة إلى حضورنا القمة الاستثنائية في كامبالا حول البرنامج الإفريقي الشامل للتنمية الزراعية لما بعد مالابو. وقد اعتمدنا خلال هذه الاجتماعات قرارات وإعلانات تهدف إلى تعزيز الأمن الغذائي وتطوير القدرات الزراعية وتقليص معدلات الجوع في إفريقيا تمهيداً للقضاء عليه مستقبلاً. كما علمنا
effectively part in the G20, and there are also a series of other important resolutions that were made in various areas that should serve our union in line with Agenda 2063. So in this regard, we had to strengthen our relations with our international partners and therefore defend the interest of our continent in international and global fora, and these were most of the efforts that were engaged throughout last year. We had the ministerial meeting of the Tokyo International Conference on African Development, TICAD, within the Japanese capital, the city of Tokyo, and that session allowed us actually to assess cooperation from year 2021 until 2024, and also prepare the 9th summit for this very important partnership, which is to be convened in the city of Yokohama in Japan. The also African-Turkish conference in Djibouti that was held in November last year, whereby we reviewed and assessed of the strategy, our joint strategy for the years of 2021 until 2026, as adopted by the African-Turkish Summit, which was held previously. We also had the first session of the Russian-African of the G20 in the margin of the ordinary General Assembly of the United Nations, and we were keen throughout such meetings and numerous conferences that were held at various levels. We were keen on strengthening and building our relations with our development partners so as to, for the continent to greatly benefit from such partnerships. And I would say that in this regard, I did take part in your name in a number of roundtables as well as meetings on the issue of migration, climate change, and others, and I have met with dozens of ministers of foreign affairs from the entire world, and I have always tabled the the challenges being faced by Africa with regard to climate change in Africa, and also how to address the issue of migration and to reform the international or the United Nations Security Council as well as the World Trade Organization. Ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, we have during this period made very important strides in our effort to strengthen our African Union through resolutions that would be serving the interests of our peoples and achieve security and development in all areas. Today, we are assuming a major responsibility so as to continue down this path and also to work on strengthening the principles of the essence of our aspirations. Aligned and consistent with these, we have actually convened today's session, and which will be where we will see very important elections. And in this regard, I would invite you all to please ensure that the elections are held in with a spirit of African cooperation and mutual assistance, and also to achieve the aspirations and ambitions of our African peoples in terms of union and also in prosperity. I wish to close my statement by insisting on some elements that were inspired by my modest experience within this council. In the beginning of our statement, we actually spoke to global evolution, which is actually quite concerning and full of uncertainty, but at the same time it does actually invite us to choose the best for us and to continue make efforts in this regard. So we should learn from the current uncertainty a lesson that should be a permanent concern for us. The only alternative we have is to strengthen our organization, our continental organization, which should be the only place where we should have the blossoming of all our projects, be they political or otherwise. There is a new polarity being developed, and it should be actually quite efficient. However, there is little room for fragmentation and atomization. So we today, as tomorrow, we are demanded to show greater integration and solidarity and mutual responsibility. This is the temple of our strength. This very room, regardless of the scenario, the only useful organization for us is the African Union. Africa will never be strong should this assembly not address all of the ideas that were championed by the founding fathers, and we have the responsibility to turn them into reality. So we should seek the most effective ways to continue to work on convergence, because this is what the matter consists in. We need to work on developing the wake of convergence, as Mr. Musa had said, and we should do so while respecting the letter of our text. We need to work on this harmony that should serve as the source of our strength. Time is short, and we have to make advances at the pace that will allow us to bridge as soon as possible the gaps that we have with others. So unity, solidarity, and wisdom must be the true levers for all of our efforts here, and this is also what is at stake in our collective odyssey. I thank you all, and peace be upon you, and I bid you successful proceedings.
شكرا معالي الوزير.
Thank you, Minister, President of the Executive Council of the African Union, for this statement.
To move to the arrangement of the family photo, while calling the rest of the respective delegates to remain in their seats to ensure the smooth organization of the family photo, allow me this time to call honorable heads of delegations in a staggered manner to proceed to the photo session location to avoid overcrowding. Allow me first to call distinguished ministers and heads of delegations from Liberia, Libya, Madagascar, and Malawi. Please follow our protocol team to the family photo session, this direction. There is only one gate going to the family session. Distinguished ministers and heads of delegations from Cape Verde, Cameroon, Central African Republic, Chad, Comoros, Congo, Cote d'Ivoire, Democratic Republic of Congo, Djibouti, Egypt, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Swatini, the Gambia, Ghana, Guinea-Bissau, Kenya, and Lesotho. Please follow our protocol team to the family photo. The gate is behind here, this direction, please. Distinguished ministers and heads of states and heads of delegations from Sierra Leone, Somalia, South Africa, South Sudan, Tanzania, Togo, Tunisia, Uganda, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Algeria, Angola, Benin, Botswana, and Burundi. Please follow our protocol team to the photo session location. Please use the behind doors here. Our protocol, they are guiding you to the right direction. Please, all the other delegates to remain seated. Thank you. Now, distinguished ministers and heads of the delegations from Mauritius, Morocco, Mozambique, Namibia, Nigeria, Rwanda, Sahrawi Republic, Sao Tome and Principe, Senegal, and Seychelles. Please allow our protocol team to guide you to the family photo session. And now, distinguished heads of Africa CDC, Director General of Africa CDC, Secretary General of AFCFTA, AUDA-NIPAD, APRM. Please allow our protocol team to lead you to the photo session location. Excellencies, African Union Commissioners, please kindly follow our protocol team to the photo session location, please. This direction. And then allow me now to invite the high podium to the family photo. Distinguished African Union Commission Chairperson, Minister of Foreign Affairs, African Cooperation and Mauritania and Abroad, and Chairperson of the African Union Executive Council, Your Excellency, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, Your Excellency, Under-Secretary General and Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission to Africa, and Your Excellency, African Union Commission Deputy Chairperson. Please allow me to take you to the family photo session location. Thank you. You go, come.
The Pulse of Africa, the Face of Ethiopia, and the Voice of Africa. And we are live here from the African Union headquarters in the capital of Africa. And the Council of Ministers and the Executive Council meeting has already kicked off with opening remarks of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Gideon Timotheus, and the African Union Commission Chairperson, Musa Faki Mohammed. And some of the major issues that will be discussed during the Executive Council meeting are the institutional reform. And what do we expect, Barakat, from this executive meeting that has already kicked off today?
Thank you, Dasta. You're right. One of the main discussion points of the Executive Council of the Foreign Affairs would be the institutional reform of the African Union. As we know that the institutional reform of the African Union was started in 2016, and the then Assembly of the African Union started reforming the African Union by 2017, and Rwandan President Paul Kagame was assigned by the then Assembly of the African Union to champion and advocate for the institutional reform of the African Union. But then, Dasta, as you know, that the African Union had some sort of problem in terms of the organizational structure. You know, they were saying that the African Union organizational structure has fragmented and lack coordination among different departments and organs. At the same time, its focus also very diverse, and it's like specific priorities. At the same time, in terms of functioning, African Union was not as such functional in terms of just delivering the task it is mandated by the Assembly. That's why these are some of the clues for the necessity of the African Union's institutional reforms. So far, I think it's around 4 years, and there are some achievements registered by this institutional reform. For example, if you look at previously there was 8 commissioners, now it's become 6, and the gender and regional representation at the African Union leadership position also given due emphasis through this institutional reform. The other one is the merit-based recruitment system here at the African Union, and the staff also goes through some sort of seasonal assessment. So this is the result of the institutional reform of the African Union, but still there are many challenges when it comes to the implementation of this reform. And this session actually expected to deliver on this issue and would expect to put forward some solution to fast-track the implementation of the African institutional reform.
And speaking of the challenges facing the institutional reform that you have already mentioned, the other one is the African institutional reform has already decided to levy 0.2% of tax from value eligible goods imported from non-member states. And this has not been implemented well to date. This is due to some of the member state countries are not taking well execution with regard to that. But this would have been even a much better step forward for Africa to execute its operational programs and budgetary operations, with reaching up to 75% of its operational budgetary. But so far that has not been achieved, and I think the executive councils will be deliberating on this thoroughly, and directions will be set, and this is one of the issues that is expected. And the other one, as I have been mentioning, the transparency and the merit-based recruitment of commissioners and commissioners that has been reduced from 8 to 6 is now expected to select, and it will be forwarded for the heads of states and they will be appointing. And this is expected to follow through the principles that are set during the 2021, which is on equitable regional representation, gender parity, and even predictable rotation of the commissioners. And these are some of the other issues that are expected even to be discussed during this executive council meeting.
Yeah, you're right, Desta. The other major discussion point of the session would be the international representation of the Africa. Africa has been sidelined or marginalized, at the same time defranchised from the international political system or the architecture. And the African leaders has been calling for the reform of the United Nations as an international organization to have a seat for the African Union. So this is one of the major concerns of the session as well. And African leaders has been convinced that Africa should have a permanent seat in the United Nations Security Council, so that Africa could significantly contribute for the maintenance of peace and security in the continent, not only the continent but also across the world. So Africa's country has been calling for the United Nations reform, at the same time having a seat at the United Nations Security Council. This call would be one of the major discussion points of the session. So I think they would put forward this agenda by the foreign ministers of the African countries here at the session.
Of course, as you have mentioned, Barakat, multiple discussions have been held at the international arena with regard to allowing the rightful place of Africa at the UN Security Council. It has been, so far to date, it has been unjust and even unrepresentative of the African Union, with 55 countries and over 1.2 billion population. And avoiding such a representation at the international arena is not only unjust, it's not even eligible to proceed such kind of mechanisms. And the executive councils are expected to head on with this and set forth some directions on how to attain the African rightful place at the United Nations Security Council. Related to that, the African Union Executive Council is expected to deliberate on the peace and security situation with regard to the peace and security architecture of the continent, with its more prominent pillars of the continental early warning, which is predicting and even informing before conflicts happen, and peace fund that finances the African Union peace operation, peace and security operations, mediation, and even the preventive diplomacy across the continent. Panel of the wise and workers to find a lasting peace across the continent, which is a notable words mentioning thing, which is recently that have been taken place in the Pretoria Peace Agreement, that denotes and resonates with African solutions for African problems. And this is held and even achieved through the panel of wise. And the African Standby Force is again part of the peace and security discussion, which will be expected to enhance and boost its stability and capability. And the Department of Political Affairs and Peace and Security Commissioner is again one of the issues that are expected to be raised during the Executive Council meeting. And the other one is the African Union Peace and Security Council, which is one of the highest ranking organs of the AU. And this is part of the overall discussions that are expected to be deliberated during the Executive Council meeting. And do we have other issues that are expected during this session?
I think these are some of the major points of the discussion for the sessions, but some issues related with the African Union's collaboration with international institutions such as the United Nations, the European Union, the BRICS country, even the BRICS by itself. Also the major point of discussion for the session, but specifically the financing of the institution would be the major agenda of the foreign ministers. You know, this is the long overdue question of African countries and African Unions to be more strength, to be more active in its operation. It has to have its own financial independence. So this would be, I think, the major discussion point of the African ministers here in the session.
Of course, the continental resilience is on the way in many multifaceted directions, be it food security and financial stability and self-resilience. So the African ministers today are expected to discuss on this and set forth with concrete directions and forward it to the heads of states. Then we'll hear more.
Yeah. Maybe the other issues related with the agricultural transformation would be one of the agenda for the executive councils, because in Africa, most of the times we have been struggling with the food insecurity, and some African countries, including Ethiopia, has been making some stride in terms of the transformation of the agriculture sector. So some countries expected to present their experience in terms of just the change that they have been brought about in this sector. So this would be, I think, one of the agenda for the session.
And of course, we'll be returning back with updates of the Executive Council meeting and the latest outcomes. And stay tuned, and a few minutes later, our Arabic colleagues will let you know what is happening at the headquarters.
Yeah, we'll be back. Stay with us.
Stay tuned.
أعزائي المشاهدين، انتهت للتو الجلسة الافتتاحية للدورة 46 للمجلس التنفيذي لمفوضية الاتحاد الأفريقي، وأيضا مجلس الوزراء الذين جاءوا، الوزراء الأفارقة الذين جاءوا من مختلف الدول الأفريقية هنا في أديس أبابا العاصمة مقر الاتحاد الأفريقي. نقل لكم فعاليات وأحداث هذه الاجتماعات من POA عربي نبض أفريقيا. خاطب المجتمعين وزير الخارجية الأثيوبي جديون تيموثيوس، وكذلك رئيس مفوضية الاتحاد الأفريقي موسى فكي محمد، وأيضا رئيس اللجنة الاقتصادية الأفريقية كليفر جيكيتي، وقدم كلماتهم للمشاركين في هذا المؤتمر.
تحدث ممثل إثيوبيا وزير الخارجية جديون تيموثيوس حول العديد من المواضيع وحث عليها، ومن أهمها موضوع أجندة 2063 للاتحاد الأفريقي، وتطرق حول كيفية تطوير الاقتصاد وربط الاقتصاد بين الدول والعديد وقضايا الأمن في القارة الأفريقية.
إذا رئيس اللجنة الاقتصادية الأفريقية كليفر جيتيتي سلط الضوء على أهمية تحقيق العدالة للأفارقة في المؤسسات التمويلية الدولية، وحث الأفارقة كذلك على الاستفادة من ثرواتهم الطبيعية بصورة صحيحة، كما حث أيضا على هيكلة المؤسسات التمويلية الدولية والتي تعمل على تهميش الدولة الأفريقية أو القارة الأفريقية. فيما سلط الرئيس المفوضية للإتحاد الأفريقي موسى فكي محمد على أهم التغيرات أو التغيرات الهيكلية التي كانت أثناء رئاسته في مجال الزراعة ومجال الصحة وغيرها من المجالات، مؤكدا بأهمية إسكات البنادق وتحقيق الأمن والاستقرار في القارة الأفريقية، حيث ذكر بأن السودان والكونغو الديمقراطية تعتبر من أهم أو أكثر البؤر الموجودة في أفريقيا من حيث انعدام الأمن. نعم.
وتستمر فعاليات هذا الاجتماع للأيام القادمة، اليوم وغدا وبعد غدا تستمر هذه الاجتماعات، وننقلها لكم عبر قناتكم POA عربي نبض أفريقيا.
POA عربي وجه أثيوبيا،
صوت أفريقيا.
كونوا معنا.
Hello and a very warm welcome. This is Pulse of Africa, the face of Ethiopia, and the voice of Africa. Today we are here at the African Union headquarters here in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and we're going to give you the latest updates and in-depth coverage of the 2025 African Union Summit. And I am Zelalem Ibaltal. Joining me is my colleague Getinet Shenkute. Getinet Shenkute, good morning, good afternoon, and can you briefly tell us how the 2025 African Union Summit is undergoing?
Great, Zelalem. So the African Union Summit 2025 has three types of sessions. The first session is actually the Permanent Representatives Committee meeting, which was actually ended last month in January 31, 2025. And the second one is actually that has been started in the early morning of this today, the African Union Executive Council. Was attended by foreign ministers of African countries. They came from the rest of the continent and every countries. So there was actually a speech, an opening speech by the ministers, including the chairperson of the African Union Commission, Musa Faki Mohammed, and also Ethiopian foreign ministers Gideon Timotheus. So Zelalem, how was the opening speech, and what are those major issues were raised in the morning, in the opening speech?
Great. Getnet, as you rightly stipulated, the 2025 African Union Summit has been undergoing extremely very well. And today, as you rightly elaborated, the Executive Council's meeting has been kicked off this morning. And foreign ministers of different African countries, of course, member countries of African unions have been presented, and they are attending the summit. And important speeches have been made. And foreign ministers of Ethiopia, His Excellency Dr. Gideon Timotheus has made a brilliant speech there. As a foreign minister of the host country, Ethiopia, His Excellency Dr. Gideon Timotheus extended his warm welcome to foreign ministers of Africa and African Union leaders. Dr. Gideon Timotheus has emphasized in his speech the importance of working in solidarity, in collaboration to bring about the desired development, the desired level of development and prosperity in the continent. In fact, to realize the 2063, which is the blueprint for Africa, African leaders need to work hand in hand to bring about development, which African citizens are desperately needing. The Commissioner of African Union Commission, His Excellency Dr. Musa Faki Mohammed, has also delivered a speech. By the way, Dr. Musa Faki Mohammed has stayed in this position as Commissioner of African Union Commission for the last 8 years. And Dr. Musa Faki Mohammed has highlighted the important achievement that has been gained over the past 8 years in the area of education, the area of development and integration. And what strikes me most is Dr. Musa Faki Mohammed's speech regarding African Continental Free Trade Area. He said African Continental Free Trade Area is a game changer for African development, for African prosperity. You know, the surprising thing is, Gitternet, Africans are disconnected in infrastructure, in trade, in development. For instance, if you take the example of telecommunication, you know, the call from Ghana to Nigeria is more expensive than the call from Ghana to America. This shows how Africans are disconnected among themselves. And this African Continental Free Trade Area is a nice initiative which can elevate Africans' development, trade, and economy. Enormous speeches have been made in the Executive Council's meeting. You may add some of the speech, some of the important extracts getting it.
Yeah, exactly, Zalalam. So, and another issues was raised by the African Union, I mean the African Union Economic Commission for Africa is also made by the speech. His Excellency Clever got it. He raised the issue that, you know, Africa was economically extracted by the colonizers, and that extraction, that resource extraction left the continent poor and still suffering from economic crisis. And the African continent and its people has still need, you know, compensation from those extract bodies and from the colonizer bodies of the past. And also he added and he stressed that the need for restructuring global organs, especially you know, financial organs like the World Health Organization and IMF and other governance systems that rightly should involve African countries and participate in this case. And also he added the need to establish its African-owned credit association or a credit agency rather than depend on foreign heirs and financial creditors. And he called for all the African head of states to rethink and stipulate, reinforce this agenda also. So the other speaker was also the African Union Council speaker, the African Union Council President, the Mauritanian Foreign Minister also. He mentioned that last year's many challenges, especially the global geopolitical shift and conflicts around the world, like he mentioned the Russian nuclear war that has resulted so many negative impacts for the African continent, and he also mentioned the Gaza war between Hamas and Israel that really affected the African continent. Even within the African continent, there are lots of conflicts and violence, extremism, and climate changes that has affected the continent so far.
You have interestingly elaborated the points very well. Of course, the Executive Council's morning session has been completed, and we will give further updates as it comes. So the much anticipated African Union Summit is the Summit of African Union Leaders, the 38th Ordinary Session of African Union, where African head of states and governments will gather here in African Union's headquarters, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and discuss on some of the pressing and enduring challenges of the continent. So this year, the 2025 African Union Summit agenda, the major theme is, of course, justice for Africans and peoples of African descent. This is a most important agenda because Africa needs justice, Africa needs reparation, Africa needs compensation, because there has been injustice perpetrated on peoples of Africa over the last 100 years. And of course, the injustice, the crimes, the atrocities against the people of Africa started during the slave trade. During that time, the great majority of African people were transported to America and Caribbean, and they were physically exploited a lot. And then what comes was colonization. After 1884, Bismarck's call, European colonizers came to Africa, entered to African soil, and they dominated Africa. They controlled Africa, they abused Africa, they suppressed Africa, they manipulated Africa. They prospered. In fact, they developed in the expense of Africans. And this needs a compensation, and it all starts with recognition. And this should be recognized historically, and Africa needs a compensation from those who perpetrated atrocities and crimes against its people.
Exactly, Zainab. As rightly elaborated about the theme of this year, justice for Africans and the people of African descent through reparation is a very important theme, actually, has come in a very critical juncture because, as you mentioned earlier, Africans had suffered a lot of challenges, especially there was a lot of atrocities committed by aggressors and colonizers, especially since the African Union, I mean the African continent, has gained its independence in the 1960s. They were extracted economically, they were oppressed, and they were also paid dearly in every sphere. So Africans right now, even within the continent, also across the globe, have been suffering a lot of segregation and discrimination. So the people of Africa needs such kind of compensation. So the leaders of the African, especially for the 13th African Union session, is expected to come with a bold decision how the African peoples and the continent itself get compensation, especially at the international level, like Africa still rightly not represented by the international organ, including the United Nations Security Council, which is the African Union has been still demanding to have a permanent representation in this organ. On the same thing, when you're talking about financial institutions in the global arena, like the World Bank and IMF, have not yet included Africa rightly. So Africa as a continent and the continent organ, the African Union, has been demanding to have a structural change, the architecture of the financial organization. And also, Zalalem, the African Union summit, for the upcoming summit that is going to start the upcoming weekend is expected to deliver on choosing choosing the leadership of the African Union Commission, especially the former commissioner will replaced by another person. So this election also, this leadership election will dominate the summit itself, Zalala.
Dear viewers, you have been watching our live reports from African Union headquarters here in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Thanks for joining us. The African Union Summit is still going on, and we will be back with other relevant information. Till then, goodbye to you all.
Stay tuned.